Not all that long ago, black people living in the United States were not allowed to get married. We were, alongside the right to vote and the right to a fair and speedy trial, denied access to the most fundamental civil and human rights, including the most basic standard of humanity, the right to be free. Now, within the logic of the American legal system, this made sense. After all, black people in the eyes of the state were considered property, not people. Chattel, not children of God. But lest we fall into the temptation of simply articulating the racial horror without also announcing the revolutionary hope, the truth of the matter is, though black people could not legally marry, we still found ways to not only form intimate unions, but to build families and to make revolutionary love. The miracle of black love, my sisters and my brothers, is that it has never been predicated or dependent upon the logic and laws, nor the relevance and recognition of white American society. In other words, black people have always found a way to rise up amid racist repression, to do and to be so much of what racism has so desperately sought to prevent us from doing and becoming. Now let us fast forward to today. If we're not looking critically enough, it may seem like a lot has changed. We have a black president. Some even say that we live in a post-racial society. From this perspective, it seems as if we've progressed. After all, Jordan Davis could get married, but still, he wasn't able to. And the truth of the matter is, he wasn't able to because the same system that barred black people from the institution of marriage for hundreds of years is the same system that prevented Sean from marrying his high school sweetheart just 9 years ago. What do I mean? I mean that the same spirit of anti-black state violence that lynched thousands of black bodies, not just in the South, but even right here in neoliberal New York City, is the same spirit that shot 50 rounds at a 23-year-old unarmed black man 4 hours before his own damn wedding. Quote, "That was supposed to be the happiest day of my life." Nicole Paltry Bell, Sean's former fiancée, painfully explained in an interview. But it turned out to be the worst day of my life. Everyone who came for the wedding stayed for the funeral. End quote. Sean was buried in the suit he would have worn at his wedding. Now, the question I want us to think about in light of all of this is, what does it mean for the same authority that has the power to marry you to be the same authority that has the power to murder you and get away with it? What does it mean? Riverside Church, Sean Bell's last words don't appear in any holy text. They have not been canonized by some esteemed religious council. They, in fact, are words that many of us, if we're lucky enough, hear relatively often from loved ones and intimate partners, from family members and from friends. Yet and still, under the context and conditions of his death, Sean's seemingly mundane words manifest with new meaning, particularly in a moment where black culture is consumed the world over while black humanity is still crucified on the American crosses of white supremacy and anti-black state violence. Yes, Sean Bell, a 23-year-old young black man, has something profound, dare I say prophetic, to tell and to teach not only the church, but the entire country today. But first, let me be clear. There is nothing redemptive about suffering itself. What they did to our brother Sean and our sister Nicole should have never happened. But the question for us today is, what is our response? The bad news is that two precious little girls, Jada and Jordan, will never be able to touch or talk to their father in the flesh ever again. The bad news is that this is bigger than Sean Bell. Every 28 hours in America, a black person is killed by police or a vigilante. But death and despair, no matter how prominent they may be in the narrative of black life, don't tell the whole story of who we are as a people. May we never forget that we come from a long tradition, authored by a beautiful and a brilliant people, a tradition that never allowed death to have the last word. Although Sean and Nicole's dream of living together forever ended in tragedy, Nicole Paltry Bell turned a nightmare into a new beginning. Just months after burying Sean, she launched the organization When It's Real, It's Forever, which operates as an after-school program that serves children from single-parent homes and families who may not be able to afford expensive programs. So as we remember the life of Sean, let us not forget about the labor of the woman who has transformed her mourning into a movement. But what will we do with our mourning? What is our response to Sean and Nicole not being able to get married and build a life together simply because we live within a system that never intended them to live in the first place? What are we going to do about the fact that every 28 hours in America, a black person is killed by a police officer or a vigilante? What are we going to do about Tamir Rice, Ayanna Stanley Jones, Oscar Grant? What are we going to do about Amadou Diallo, Chantel Davis, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Renisha McBride, Trayvon Martin? What are we going to do? Right. Nothing we do can bring Sean back. Nothing we do can roll back the hands of time to that November morning in Queens, New York, when 3 NYPD officers took our brother's life and a couple's dream. But there is something we can do to create a world where the next Amadou goes to college, where the next Chantel doesn't die but lives, where the next Mike Brown doesn't get shot for walking down the street, where the next Eric Garner can breathe, where the next Renisha makes it home, where the next Trayvon is screaming because he got into college and not because he got lynched by a wannabe cop. Yes, we can intimately commit ourselves to a struggle for justice and freedom, for black life and black liberation. And the beauty of this marriage, my sisters and my brothers, this communal commitment is that you don't need no paperwork. You don't need no licensed preacher. You don't need no pretty dress or no fancy suit. You don't need no wedding rings, and you don't need no money for a honeymoon. And glory to God, you don't have to be heterosexually identified or a U.S. citizen or have a clean record to get married to this movement. All you need is a heart hungry for freedom and a spirit thirsty for justice. And if we are really going to marry this movement today, then we ought to have some vows. I can't tell you what your vows are, but let me share some of mine with you. I vow to love black people unapologetically. I I vow to love myself because I know that if I don't first love myself, then there ain't no way I can love anybody else. I vow to fight as I unlearn systems of oppression, of patriarchy and homophobia, of capitalism and militarism, of misogyny and white supremacist theologies. I vow to stand alongside my transgender sisters and brothers in the fight against trans antagonism and violence. I vow to speak truth to power, whether I'm at the White House or the jailhouse. I vow to never be silent, long as oppression exists, because silence in the face of suffering is sin. I vow to mentor the next Ayanna Stanley Jones, and to make sure that the Mike Brown of my neighborhood knows his rights. I vow to organize within my community, to take care of my elders, and to inspire a generation that's been marked as disposable to marry a new movement. I vow to never give up, no matter how hard and rough the road gets. I vow to do the best I can with what I have, no matter where I find myself. I vow to not simply preach love with my lips, but to practice love with my life. I vow to always remember Amadou Diallo, Chantel Davis, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Renisha McBride, Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, and the countless victims of anti-Black state violence whose blood is daily sacrificed on the altar of white supremacy and anti-Black state violence. Strange fruit continues to grow in the harvest of American life. No matter how different the fruit may grow, the root of the tree is the same. Racism, as theologian James Cone teaches us, is still the great sin of American society. But we're here today to bear witness to the birth of a movement that's connected to a history of struggle. We're here today to bear witness to a new kind of marriage. A marriage not sponsored by the state, but one that's sanctioned by the Spirit. And now by the power not invested in me, but by the power that's invested in we, by the God of love and of liberation, we can declare ourselves married to the movement. And if Sean Bell's life and last word teaches us anything, it's that death, even when it's state-sanctioned, will never, ever do us part. I love you.